Good morning. I want to start by making two comments. As you listen to the remarks that I'm going to make, one of the themes that I think you're going to see across them is I do anticipate that we're going to be working in very different ways in the future than we've been working. And one of my ideas is that we are going to engage in much more collaboration to bring together those who are educating our professionals with those who are employing our professionals. So it was very much a privilege for me to accept the invitation to be here this morning when the School of Library and Information Science Studies here at Catholic is bringing together practitioners, students, and others in the community, including alumni, to address some of the key issues that we face today. I also want all of you to know that I've helped to infiltrate the program. 3 of the students from the Simmons program are here this morning, and they're at the back table because they graciously agreed to see this as part of the education experience that they're engaging with me in this week. And one of the things we'll be doing when we meet formally this afternoon is reviewing and reflecting on the experience that we will have had here this morning. One of the themes when I was campaigning for the office of President of the American Library Association was the importance of taking steps to reduce the gap between education and practice. And I think one of the ways to do this is to have much more regular conversation and serious thinking about what is it that's changing in practice that needs to inform what it is that we're doing in our education. So I invite you, as you listen to my remarks this morning, to begin thinking about what are some of your ideas about what needs to be emphasized in learning. And I would also call your attention to still another handout in the packet. On a green sheet is a list of, I might call them programs of emphasis here at the school. And as you look through that, if this is new information to you, as it was to me, you'll see that Catholic is very much trying to keep pace with the changes that we're experiencing in the field. I also want you to be aware, before I turn to my remarks, that my hope is that I will take about 25 to 30 minutes to share my thoughts and then deliberately pause for engagement with you. I'm interested in hearing your reactions, but I'm also interested in picking up on any ideas for the community that I may not have addressed within my remarks. So I'll begin with my thoughts about how the work is changing and how our roles are changing. One of the significant changes that I've been observing is a recognition that we need to move away from a focus on doing, the activities, the steps that relate directly to what we traditionally have viewed to be the work of the library, to spending much more time in reflection and thinking together. Part of what comes from a recognition of the changes in the digital context is an understanding that we're facing situations, problems, challenges, and I also have to add, finding opportunities that are new. And often those are situations that require that we bring together a diverse group of individuals who will be willing and able to spend time in addressing and planning carefully how is it that we can move forward. Even on that green sheet, you'll see project management listed as one of the areas for learning. That's been one of the themes in learning in libraries for the last several years because there's a recognition that we need to plan before we actually do. So I could have put it more simply by saying those of us who work in libraries are going to finally move from being human doers to be human beings more in the practice that we engage in. We're also already seeing a shift away from it's all about what I as an individual do in my work to much more being about what I do to contribute to the work of the library or the organization as a whole. And recognizing that what I do is very much done in collaboration with others. And that collaboration is no longer happening just within my work unit. It's happening increasingly where I am working in a given day or a week with a variety of different groups, some of them having been formally charged, but others just emerging because a need has made itself known. One of the reasons that I have valued so much being part of this field is that my colleagues in this field, and I presume yours, are individuals who are deeply committed to service, and also individuals who, for the most part, really care about the set of working relationships that they have. And the time I've spent with the Simmons students this week, it's human resource management. So one of our themes, of course, has been all those challenging people with whom we work. But there's a real value on the part of most of our colleagues for working together, and it's a strength upon which we can build. I think the most significant change that's underway in our work is the need to be out of the library building and in the community. And what that's calling for is a much greater understanding of the community, its characteristics, the things that are changing in that community, its needs and its desires. And we're fortunate in our field that there are a number of people who've taken the lead in helping us understand effective ways to learn more about the communities that we're serving. And one that is obvious, I'm sure, to everyone in this room is the changes that we're experiencing in our work and the evolution of these roles is happening at a much quicker pace. And the last comment on this theme that I'll make is, as we think about what's going on today and the changes that we've experienced in the last 3 to 5 years, and we start wondering what will we experience in the next 3 to 5 years, increasingly it's a question that stumps people. And I think it's a good thing to recognize that it's going to be challenging for us to anticipate what those changes would be. One of the things I want to remind us of, and particularly those of you who may have been here in October when I was on this podium with Susan Hildreth at the Institute for Museum and Library Services, is coming out of their new strategic plan are 3 themes, and I think they're themes that apply to how our work and roles are changing, and I want to remind us of them. And the first one is communities, and it's everything that I said a few moments ago, the importance of the library and librarians being out in the community, working with the community, and assuming a leadership role in the community. The second one is we've shifted from talking about is it books or is it electronic resources or the digital content to really understanding in libraries it is all about content. And our core values of access to information, intellectual freedom, preserving privacy, are all ones that we carry forward as we make this shift from the debate about print versus electronic to really recognizing we now have a variety of different formats and forms of content, and we're going to continue to see them. And the third theme is one of learning. We in libraries for centuries have contributed to people being able to learn and grow and develop. A lot of that has been self-directed, and much of it often has not come to our attention. We're becoming much more intentional about understanding how learning is taking place among the people who use our libraries, but also generally among people who are in the communities that we serve. And I would propose that one of the things we need to continue to give strong attention to is the learning that needs to take place within ourselves as individuals, but also within our organizations. A couple of years ago, Warren Bennis published a book called Geeks and Geezers, and it was all about what would be different as the digital natives began to populate the workplace. And one of the most helpful things that he did was to draw a distinction between the characteristics of what he called the analog world and the digital world. And I thought it would be helpful if I took just a few minutes and let you know about this, because I think it has real meaning for those of us who work in libraries. The piece of this that I have been using consistently in my work, because I think it directly represents what's changing in what librarians do, is in the analog world, professionals were expected to be specialists and continue to develop their specialization unless they decided to change that. Bennis was the first to use the phrase deep generalist to describe the work of professionals, and I very much see this in libraries. All of us need to continue to become adept in a set of general skills, areas of knowledge and abilities. But we also need to identify and continue to work on some areas in which we will develop deep expertise. Those areas may change, but this is part of the challenge, a set of general areas of competence, but also the need as professionals to focus in and develop personal mastery in particular areas. Another distinction that he draws is in the analog world, we looked for maps. We expected to have routes laid out for us in terms of what we would do as well as how we would do that. And you probably can guess, in the digital world, we need a compass. We need to have that ability to find what Stephen Covey identifies as true north, and you are able to work the compass when you know your values and you follow your values, but you also stay attuned to what's changing in the environment. The third area, very reflective of what I emphasize in the work that I do with library organizations, is it's away from the bureaucracy and the mechanics of how we do things to much more recognizing that our organizations are living systems. And no matter what type of library, to see the library as a living system within a larger ecosystem. Immediately, of course, it would be the parent organization, but all of those things that affect what it is that we do and how we can stay abreast of what our users need. Another piece of his distinction is, in the analog world, we manage these organizations through what he calls COP, and I know he's adopted that from someone else. David Bradford uses this term, where COP stands for command, order, and predict what's going to happen. In the digital world, it's important to make the shift to what he calls ACE, and that stands for aligning goals and behavior and performance according to what it is that we've set forth. So particularly aligning individual and unit or department work with the needs of the overall organization. Aligning what we're doing in the library and what we aspire to do with what our larger organization is working on. And certainly doing the best we can to align our efforts with the changing needs of the communities that we're serving. And then the C stands for create, and you'll hear when I talk in a few minutes about the roles. I think one of the most beneficial and exciting roles that is there for us to embrace is that of the innovator or the entrepreneur, where we are imagining, usually in concert with colleagues, new ways of addressing what the needs and the problems might be. And the E stands for empower. And this is particularly relevant for those of you who are in management or administrative positions. In today's workplace, in the digital world, with the millennials coming into the workplace, the people who are working with us very much want a fair amount of self-direction in terms of how it is that they're going to perform their work. I also, before I go into the roles, just want to take a moment and suggest where the opportunities are for us as librarians. We are trusted, as I reminded the students with whom I'm working just this morning. I hope most of you saw the January 9th issue of Time magazine, where there was a piece about fear, and there was a wonderful model that was bringing to light what we don't fear, that is what we trust, and librarians were specifically mentioned, along with teddy bears, money, and hugs. And there is a fifth one. I'm going to have to go back and look at that to pick that up. But to think of ourselves as being trusted in the way our teddy bears are trusted, really had resonance for me. It's also really important to know and appreciate how eager it is that the people we're serving in our communities are to re-engage and reconnect. We're in a very difficult time in this country, whether we think about it in terms of the social conditions or the economic conditions or even the community conditions in which we're operating. And one of the things I know about us as people is we continue to have what I refer to as a basic human need to connect and engage with others. And the promise of the library to not only transform the communities in which they operate, but to be the catalyst for that re-engagement and that reconnection is very strong in my view. So I see the library as being in a place to be that convener of the community work. And I don't know if any of you were at Midwinter and heard Rich Harwood talk, but Rich Harwood is an individual from outside of our field who is very passionate about the opportunities for libraries to be, and he calls it the convener of community dialogue that is directed at solving community problems. So I'll just quickly go through some of the roles because you could infer those from some of the remarks that I've already made. The convener role that I've just described, I think, is a very strong and compelling one. And as part of being the convener in whatever community we find ourselves, it's important for us to embrace the leadership opportunities that are there for the librarian and the collective set of librarians to be the first to say, there's a need for us to address this issue in this community. We in the library will hold a conversation and we invite you to come in and we will take care of ensuring that there's a record of what we've done and that we develop an action plan that enables us to move forward. We've been talking in this field for several years about the importance of us being partners, forming alliances, and particularly strengthening the engagement that we have with others who have an interest in serving the community. I think it's also important for us to continue the role that we've played ever since libraries were formed, and that is the educator role. We seldom use that term to refer to what it is that we do, but we are helping people learn in almost every transaction that we have. And I can take it right back to the one that's usually cited as the one that most people want to let go of, and that is, where are the restrooms in this facility? You're still providing information about where they are. But think about those times when you have engaged with someone who has come in for help, and you have taken them beyond where they thought they needed to be or what it is that they expected to receive in seeking that help. I believe that libraries as facilities and as entities in communities, but also all of us who work in them, are catalysts for change. And I think it's another underplayed and underappreciated role. We do it very well in most cases on an individual basis. I think it's critical that we begin to do this from an organizational basis. And of course, there's that deep generalist role that I adopted from Bennis's work. So as we're thinking about the convener, the catalyst for change, the community leader role, I want to highlight just a couple of aspects of this as I've reflected on it. I think we're particularly positioned to convene these conversations where we facilitate a careful look at what are the aspirations of this community? What is it that we want this place to be? What is it that we want for the people in this community? What are the concerns we have? And once you identify aspirations and concerns, we're then well positioned to ask ourselves, what is it that we want to do to address the concerns and to move toward achieving those aspirations? And what this calls for all of us to do on a regular basis and to do carefully is to take the time to understand what people are experiencing in their daily lives. Before we ask them what their aspirations and concerns are, let's do some careful study so that we have some idea of what that might be before we enter into those discussions. We need to build upon this strength that Time Magazine identified of being trustworthy and make sure that we hold each other accountable for our actions matching our words, for fulfilling our promises, and for engaging with everyone in a very genuine and authentic way. And of course, it also calls for being credible and telling the truth. We also, generally in the field, need to make that transition from another core competency. Most of us are doing this work because we have a deep desire to help others. But it's still the case that some of us want to help others one-on-one. We need to translate this now into helping by collaborating with our colleagues to develop the new innovative ways that we can meet needs and provide services. So I have my own list of some of the transitions that I think need to take place within our organizations, and it begins with understanding that for us to be effective as libraries, we need not only to have everyone with whom we work be accountable for their best performance, but we need to learn how to hold each other accountable so that we achieve mutual accountability within groups and units, but also across the organization. Sometimes I get a laugh as a response when I make this statement, but I've been doing consulting work with all types of libraries in a serious way since 1980. It's a fairly long period of time upon which to reflect. And when I reflect upon that, there are a number of differences and accomplishments that I see, but one that I particularly pay attention to related to the area of accountability is much more of a need recognized not to tolerate the inadequate or the poor performers. And now what we need to do, and this is part of what I do in my work, is help managers and administrators deal with those performance issues. In terms of performance itself, it's very critical that we are ready to come to work and do our best work on a regular basis, and that all of us have an aspiration to create an organization in which high performance is what we expect and experience on a day-to-day basis. Everyone gets up every morning, their first thought is, I can't wait to go into the library, work with all these great colleagues, and see what it is that we can discover in our practice today, and how it is that we can help each other really be the best that we can be. A lot of my work in the last 10 years has been directed at helping libraries become much more open, transparent, and fluid organizations. And the usual way that is described is we need to restructure this organization. Restructuring tends to produce a fear response. And the theme I'm using, because I actually have this aspiration, at least to start this work in my service to ALA, I'm using the term rethinking ALA, which some of you will recognize is really a cover for thinking about the extent to which that structure is really enabling us to do everything we need to do for our members. But rethinking also encompasses creating a more effective work environment and culture here, and rethinking also means discovering new ways of accomplishing work that are more suited to the preferences of the people who are doing that work. Leadership needs to be facilitative and shared across the set of people who work in the library, but it also needs to be something that everyone understands they have the opportunity to engage in. I've been a proponent for some time of recognizing that much of the leadership that takes place in a library today on a day-to-day basis is exercised by the people who are not formal supervisors, managers, or leaders. I use the phrase, it's leadership by opportunity taken. And change. Everyone in this field needs to understand that change is a way of life. Change does produce the fear response, but if we can change our thinking and translate that fear response into, rather than fear with the physical tightness of the chest that I get, maybe I might begin to think that means that there are hormones like adrenaline that are beginning to work to alert me that something's going to be different. And rather than staying with the fear, instead recognizing the other opportunity this creates in us as humans is it opens us up to learning. And brain research is suggesting what I physically feel here is also triggering a whole set of responses in the brain. And when the brain opens up to learning, that's when we have the opportunity not only to learn, but to reduce that fear response that traditionally we were more likely to identify. And then the last thing, as individuals, again as groups, and as the organization as a whole, we really need to practice strategic planning. And strategic planning means that we are focusing in on what's most important. And that strategic intent, those choices that we make, need to be very much directed at making a difference for the people in the communities that we're serving. So to the competencies that I see to accomplish all of this work, the first is to build on the ones that we already have as core competencies. And first and foremost, I would suggest our service orientation is a core competency that we will carry forward into the future. Another competency that we will carry forward is our ability to solve problems. The tools, the techniques, and the way that we do that will change, but our ability to do that is still a core competency. A core competency for many of us is being able to communicate across cultures. And in human resource management, the term that's usually used is cross-cultural sensitivity and the ability to practice communication skills that cross the different cultures. We also need to not only embrace change, but we need to be effective in leading change. We need to understand the change process, how it affects people, and we also need to identify strategies for a change process that will work in our particular situation. And there's a set of principles about change. The one I always think of first is you can't make people change. What you can do is create incentives that will cause them to get on board with that change. And the other one that's now coming to mind that took me a while to come to terms with is when you're leading change, for the majority of people with whom you're working, it's a case of taking 2 steps forward and then taking a step back to make sure that you have the individual with you. When I apply that in the digital context, I think we're doing a lot of dancing as we're going through any kind of a change process. We need to become much more effective in the areas of exercising influence and being persuasive. I am probably not going to be using the term advocacy very much in the next couple of years because I think our work really calls for us to build alliances, to find effective partners, and to become very adept in exercising influence and becoming persuasive. We need to also continue to build upon the achievement orientation that so many of us have and act on a regular basis. One that may be part of your course set already, but is not yet one that I see across the field, is an acceptance of ambiguity. I'm often in situations where the question that is posed is suggesting there's one way to do something, and if you would only give me the answer, I'd be able to do it and we'd be able to move on. This is going to sound trite perhaps, but it's gray, it's not black and white anymore. And the good news in this for us should be it's our gray matter that's going to help us deal with the gray, this ambiguity. And I've already talked about the importance of continuing to be trustworthy. If I were asked, and I may be asked in the question and answer, although I'll head that off, what is the one area in which all of us need to work in order to become more effective for the digital age? My answer would be building relationships. Building relationships with our colleagues in our organizations, but also building relationships across the borders that may exist within our communities as well as within our organizations. So I thought what I would do is close with some suggestions for what each individual could do beyond focusing on building relationships. And this is a set of suggestions that I've very specifically winnowed to just give you a couple of things to think about as you reflect on the keynote. Here I'm presuming that you'll do that not only for the rest of the day, but subsequently. I think it's really important that all of us understand it is, as Camilla O'Leary was talking several years ago, it is a new normal. It's really interesting how the phrase new normal, which came from a book and was picked up in the professional world, is now actually being used in retail ads. I wish I could remember the store. I think it may be J.C. Penney using that term. But the new normal for us is continual, fairly fast change where new opportunities are presented before we're ready to deal with them, where technology is on such a fast innovation cycle. Technologists don't even talk about innovation cycle anymore because it happens so quickly. And a lot of things are produced in beta, and we still, some of us, have an expectation that the problems will have been solved. We're part of helping to make those tools not only workable, but for the people who develop and market them to be able to determine which ones are going to last. The second one is we should all assume self-responsibility for learning what it is that we need to know and be able to do, but also assume self-responsibility for contributing our best work on a continual basis. Not look to others, not expect the managers to solve all the problems. One of the difficulties managers and administrators are having in the digital context is they no longer have the deep understanding of what's changing at the front lines the way the staff who are working at the front lines have. So that, of course, calls for much more interaction and communication happening to reduce that gap. All of us as professionals came into this work with a desire to pursue what I call personal mastery. We need to do this in a much deeper, more careful way. We should be, on a regular basis, sitting back, and I think it helps to do this with colleagues, and asking the question, what's different in the way we're working? What might I have become attuned to as a new area of knowledge or skill? And then collectively addressing the question, how will we learn this? One of the myths that has abounded in libraries for decades is that the way you learn is to go to workshops or conferences. And forgive me, Ingrid, come to a program such as this. Those workshops, conferences, and programs like this open you up to the learning, but the real learning that becomes part of our practice, that's integrated into who we are, occurs through the application that we do in our workplaces. And another way that you can look at the library of today is it is a rich place for what Warren Bennis calls crucible experiences, those deep learning experiences, but to be more intentional and to give more attention to what it is that we're learning. And then the last one is to seek the challenges that are there, to seek them in new assignments, to seek them in the relationships that we're developing with our colleagues and with the constituents whom we serve, but also to very much monitor in a more careful way what the changes are in the larger environment and begin to think about the problems that we see and the concerns that we have more as opportunities that are arising from the challenges that we may have identified. One of the reasons why I am so pleased to be president-elect of the American Library Association is I think there's never been a better time to be in the library field. And I became a librarian when I got my degree, not here, but at the University of Maryland in 1976. And I've been privileged to be one of the people in our field who has the ability to work with people in different types of libraries across the country, and sometimes internationally. I am reaffirmed on a regular basis in my assumption that the talent is here in the field. We just need to make changes in order to develop and foster that talent in ourselves and in our others. One of the things I do with this class every year, and I always teach it in the spring, is to close with a look at what are the trends from the Society for Human Resource Management. And the last several years, their January issue has listed what those trends would be. I think it's significant that the issue this January does not list any trend but talent development. And talent development is that process through which we are assuming the responsibility for learning and becoming the best we can be, pursuing that personal mastery. But it also now is understood to be inclusive of helping others, our colleagues within our organizations and generally within the profession, learn how to do as their best work as well. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you may have. Did I say anything that wasn't clear? Did I make comments that you weren't sure were right? And I'll repeat because I have the mic. I'll repeat.
You talked about working with communities outside the library, which is really common in...
Maybe.
Okay. You talked about working with communities outside the library, which is really common for public libraries, and maybe less common for academic libraries. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that, talk about what communities you were thinking about in particular, if you have past experiences with that sort of thing.
When I make the comment, and I'm inclusive of academic as well as public, I actually am operating from two assumptions. The first is I agree that public libraries have been making a real effort in the last several years to not only have the director and the senior management team more engaged in the community, but to expect that of a broader group of people. I also have believed that within the public library arena, going all the way back to when I first worked in a public library in 1970, there were individuals who were engaged in the community, who were informally bringing in information and helping us think about changes that we needed to make. What I think changed is there was a recognition that it needed to be much more intentional and much more carefully laid out. I hold that same view for academic libraries, and I'll bet there are a number of you in this room who regularly interact and engage with students and faculty, who make an effort to go to faculty meetings. You're part of the faculty senate. You are going into the student union. You're having lunch where the students are, or you're listening to somebody talk about something that's coming up in the classroom, and you're willing to go into the classroom. What I'm calling for that needs to be different is a much broader, and I'll use the term again, much more intentional effort, where it's clear that we expect everyone to contribute. And the work that we do is going to be based on a careful study of their current experiences, what's working for them, but also efforts on our part to anticipate their needs even before they may become aware of them. And to do all of this work in a way that they know what we're doing, that we have the courage to step out and describe and just be there wherever they are and respond in a way that they begin to value what we do. Others are not going to value libraries and the work that we do because we tell them they should. It's only going to happen when they experience evidence. It isn't even when they see it. They're going to have to experience evidence of our effect. And we do great things. I challenge you to tell me another organization in whatever type of community you're thinking that has the goodwill of the people served and the trust that the library has. I really want us to just bring that out, and I use the phrase in my mind, get out from under the bushel basket and really have others see the light that we bring, because we bring light to people's lives. Here's one. Oh, I'll remember, you can be next.
Hi. Great talk. I really appreciate everything you've said. And as somebody who's worked my background is in computer science, and I worked in that industry for 20 years, and everything that you're talking about, change management and leadership, is really valuable. And I can tell you from personal experience that the people in the organizations that I know that did and embraced those ideas, they succeeded. I want to bring up one question and have you react to this about a piece that you didn't talk about in terms of the field. So I come from an information science, computer science background. One of the things that I feel is that not only should we be providing these services, getting out of the library, but we should also, and you sort of touched on this, we should also, and not only should we also be helping to implement these new technologies, we should be actively involved in the development of these new technologies. So we should be engaged, we should be on staff at Google, we should be on staff at Amazon, and we are. But I think that's another piece that I'd like to hear you comment on, and sort of how the field is growing. It's not just about providing direct services. It's not just about getting out into the field, but it's also about perhaps a radically different look to the kinds of jobs that our graduates are going to be doing, still drawing on these core competencies.
So stay there with the mic, because it wasn't something that I thought to include, but as I listen to you, you're reminding me that it's probably even longer than 10 years. We've had people who have come through a master's in library science, gotten that degree, begun to work in what I might call a traditional library, and then made the choice to go to Apple or Google, Amazon. I don't know that Amazon has anybody, but to move into that area. What I think we need to do is to find ways to stay in touch with those individuals, and a number of them, if they stay active in the library field, tend to join SLA or other organizations that are more appropriate for them. I think it will be helpful if we infiltrate, as you're suggesting, but I also think another thing that we can do almost immediately is we can begin to go where they are, and particularly what are the conferences that the professionals at Google, Apple, Amazon go to, and we need to go there and not only just be present, but we need to begin to engage with those individuals.
Yeah, I agree. I think that will give us, as in the LIS field, a real voice in an area that hasn't been heard as much in terms of the real, sort of the leading edge development and ideas that are going on the technical side.
And the other thing, when we're there, we need to promote that and we need to communicate that, because librarians interact with people at Google in a variety of different places, but those stories often don't get told except if you happen to be in a conversation and the person will say that. And just to those of you in the room who are sitting there thinking, I can't even follow anything that Maureen said I might do to prepare for the future, I certainly am not going to be able to do this. Doesn't mean that all of us have to do everything. It means that we have to be more selective, but from our library perspective, we want to be sure that within the library, we're developing the capacity that the library needs to have, and we've got some individuals who are willing to do the work to develop that capacity initially, and then they'll turn around and they'll help the rest of us. Oh, wait a minute, I had somebody here first. I'll be able to repeat your question, so go ahead. Oh, here it comes.
Thank you. I was thinking libraries in general, but especially public libraries, with technology now, the gap between the different publics seems even more pronounced, in the sense that you can have people very, very savvy with technology, even ahead, and then somebody that is totally not knowledgeable. And there has always been gaps between the public, but it seems even now more sharply divided or pronounced, and I wanted to get your opinion on that.
So the divide between the digital haves and the digital nots seems to be sharper now than it was in the past. But again, this is a contribution that we make. Not only do we attend to those different needs and do the best we can to stay on top of helping people who are the have-nots in this be able to do what they need to do and learn how to move into the have category. We provide the technology for them in the library. And it's one of the things that our funders need to understand is how critical that resource that we're providing is to the community. All you have to do to get an appreciation of this is to go to the DC Public Library first thing in the morning when they open and see the line of people who are ready to go in. And watch the frustration build when there are more people than there are terminals. Yes?
Right along those lines, I work at the DC Public Library with my supervisor, Venetia Dempson, and Rose Asukwo, who's here also, and we'll be speaking this afternoon about a program or a series of programs that we have that address both those issues. One of them is a camp that we have every year and a monthly meetup at the library called Accessibility DC, and it's an opportunity for developers to get together with the community of adaptive technology users and discuss needs for access to the web. We have another group called, well, it's a project called the Accessibility Hackathon Project, which is an opportunity for those same groups to get together for the folks who use adaptive technologies to talk about the needs that they have and the ideas and the innovation, the potential innovation that's coming as a list of requirements out of that community. The group of developers then makes a list of those requirements and then builds the solutions to meet those needs. So a business incubator. So we've got a couple of projects that are coming out of that apps for the iPhone.
Great.
And things like that.
I really appreciate what you shared about the work that you're doing, but I also appreciate that you called to the attention of everyone in this room that we have Venetia with us. One of the 10 national winners of the I Love My Librarian Award this year. And you know me well enough to know I wanted to provide the recognition, but it also helps me make this point. This award is given to individuals who are identified by people in their communities as having made a difference. And one of the things I want to pursue is broadening the number of individuals, 10 each year, out of, I think it was 1,700 nominees, and it comes from the community, not from within the library. So we're very proud of you. Thank you. Yes?
Your prediction on the future of school librarians.
So I'm going to begin with, it's almost next to impossible for me to imagine that we can have good schools without good libraries. I'm aware now, because I've been trying to learn more about the actual plight of school libraries, that there are schools where there is not a library, but there is someone who provides library service. The trend now is that individual who provides library service is a para, and para is the term that they use in schools. This is, I think, one of the most serious issues that we face, and I actually find it incredible that we have a Department of Education in this administration that is not on the bandwagon really helping with this. But you give me yet another opportunity. There is a petition at the White House. How many of you do not know what I'm talking about when I say a petition at whitehouse.gov? You're going to be more people who can sign this. If you go to whitehouse.gov, there is a petition for support of school libraries. And the other place you can go to get linked to that is the American Library Association, ALA.org, and AASL. And here's the thing. The principals with the school library movement are trying to get 25,000 signatures on this petition. And the result of this should be that the White House then will give attention to this issue. Doesn't mean they're going to act on it, but it's a really great way of getting attention. At ALA Midwinter, we were up to 11,000 signatures. I would encourage you and the people with whom you're working to go in and sign this. This, by the way, is also an issue that everyone in this field has to pay attention to, because if school libraries go away, it is going to affect the work of academic librarians. It's already affecting the work of academic librarians because we have students who are not well prepared for college, and that's why we're doing so many of the courses for first-year students. And of course it's going to affect our lives. One of the reasons I worry about it is I want in my later years, if I should ever decide to retire, I want to be in a community where people are well-educated, they're good citizens, and they care about each other. And you learn that when you're in school, and you particularly learn it when you have access to the wonderful books that teach those lessons outside of what happens in the home with parents. Did I address that on point? Yes, I'm just relinquishing. I know. What is going on in the country. Yep. Yep, I agree. I should quickly tell you that the Washington office, in the person of Ted Wegner, is mounting a very serious grassroots effort. And I also appreciate the fact that you're already actively engaged. I think this is an issue that more of us need to be engaged in. And it's also a key need where we need to exercise influence and persuasion with the people who actually make these decisions. So here comes Ingrid. This means my time with you is over. Thank you so much.